Major news with this Duke basketball team. I mean, it's just so major, so exciting, so incredible. Isaiah Evans, that's right, Showtime Slim, coming back to Duke for his sophomore season.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thanks so much for being here with us today on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. We talk a whole lot about Duke basketball each and every day. And today, we've got big news to discuss that broke last night with Isaiah Evans coming back to Duke for his sophomore season. Midnight Eastern last night, we saw the transfer portal window come to a close, and it appears like Duke will have their roster set in place for this upcoming season. May add a transfer or two down the line here, but excited to have Showtime Slim back. So we're going to have our good buddy Leif Thulin here with us on the show to talk about his impact. We'll get the Locked On NBA big board perspective on some of these draft decisions that have been made from Duke basketball players so far, all that and so much more. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Watch us each and every day on YouTube. Like these videos, share it with your friends. We appreciate all the support that you give us here at Locked On Blue Devils. So without further ado, Leif is here with us, man. We're talking about the big news of the day, Isaiah Evans coming back for his sophomore season. People are wondering, is this guy going to go to the draft? Is he going to go to the transfer portal? What's he going to do? It is such a big win for Duke basketball that he's coming back for year two. I hope you're doing well, man.
Doing well. I'm excited. It's always a fun time of year. NBA playoffs, NBA draft ramping up. I miss college hoops, but it's good to see, even though I don't necessarily agree with all the stuff happening in the portal, it's good to see the portal activity and keep the rosters churning and making me think about college hoops. But Isaiah Evans can hoop. Like, I'm not telling anything that you guys don't know, but I think having a surplus of shooters and ability to knock down shots is never going to hurt. Obviously, Khaman is coming in, and that he's gotten a lot of buzz for performing well in various showcases and being a highly regarded recruit, reminiscent in the same range of Con Knipple. But Isaiah Evans, I think, has the inside track to being a starter for Duke after a year where he had some games where he was terrific and some games where he was a non-factor. So I think sophomore year, you're going to hope for more consistent performances, become a little bit better defensively, a little bit stronger. But the dude demonstrated on the biggest stages that he could really play. So it's always a great thing. I'm excited to see what happens on this roster and how they construct their lineups, especially because there are some transfers that Duke, I still think, is in the running to go get and supplement the roster.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, that was the thing, is that last night's the deadline to put your name in there, and now we wait for those decisions to be made. Some of these guys are going to go through the draft process to see if they want to start their professional journeys or come back to college basketball. We got to remind ourselves that it wasn't until mid-May last year that Duke found out Sion James would be joining the team, and he turned out to be such a focal point for what Duke was going to do. When you look at Isaiah Evans specifically, though, major game against Auburn at home, that was kind of his breakout game that everybody was talking about, making those 6 first-half three-pointers. And then it was an up-and-down year in terms of playing time. He finishes the year shooting greater than 40% from three, so you certainly know that's something to expect. But when you dive even deeper into those numbers, Leif, 82% of his shots were from three-point range. In a lot of ways, it felt like he was this kind of one-dimensional piece for Duke. I would figure, because there was some draft buzz here and there about him, that's one of the big reasons for coming back to school, and something that's got to excite Duke fans going into this upcoming season is I don't think we're going to see a shot diet that consists of 82% three-point shots next season.
Yeah, 82 is extreme. I think you could very easily be looking at 70 plus still, though.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be more plays where he's looking at, hey, I've got the ball in my hands, and I'm now the guy that is in Khan's spot where he comes off a screen and the three's taken away. Now he's got more leeway to put the ball on the floor, hit a mid-range, jump stop and kick out. That was something that Khan was naturally fantastic at, obviously well developed, but I think Isaiah Evans has more leeway to show more of his game. So it's certainly going to be a lower number, but Isaiah Evans is a sniper, and the threes are what the game's predicated on now. Threes and offensive rebounds are the trend in the NBA, and now college basketball's on it. Florida rebounded 39% of their misses. They won the national championship. Houston, who was able to beat Duke, they played two bigs, rebounded really well. Duke played the only team in the Final Four that didn't play two bigs, and their power forward was the best player in the country in Cooper Flagg. So my point being is that the trends are here to stay. So there's going to be more and more threes taken as well, because you get more offensive rebounds when you take threes, and therefore you can supplement that shot diet. So I think there's going to be more diversity, but I think he's going to be schemed into more shots as opposed to being the guy who's a beneficiary of superstars. And he may well be with Cam Boozer. Boozer can distribute and get him great looks. I don't think it'll be as often wide open out of just the enormous attention provided towards Cooper Flagg as it was this year. I think it'll be more frequent that he's schemed the shot, and that'll be a new challenge for him. Can he overcome being higher on the scouting report?
Yeah, again, we're still trying to figure out what exactly those final pieces are for the Duke basketball roster. In regards to the transfer portal, there are certain conversations being had about maybe some class of 2026 additions, that reclass a year early, Sebastian Wilkins being a candidate there for the Duke basketball team, but are way too early kind of look at this starting five. If people kind of forecast Duke going forward here, Leif, it'd be Caleb Foster alongside Isaiah Evans, Nick Haminia, and then on the inside, you've got Cam Boozer alongside Pat Gongba, with a couple of other really nice pieces coming off the bench, and Malik Brown. Caden Boozer certainly will play a factor for Duke into next season, maybe a larger role for Darren Harris going into his sophomore season. All of that to say, I think you could just see there, this is a wonderful opportunity for Isaiah Evans to be a focal point more frequently.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the second leading scorer on the team to me.
Yeah.
I think his volume will go up tremendously, and he shoots 40% from three. Maybe that drops to 38. Maybe he even gets better and shoots better with more volume. And that means he's a top 20 pick if that should occur. Don't guarantee that, but I think the way the roster is constructed right now, he would be the second leading scorer. If I had to guess, and I know this is not what you asked me to do, but I tend to follow college basketball pretty closely. I would say that I think that you're going to find a point guard on the team, because Caleb Foster has not proven he's good enough to be a true point guard and lead a team. I think you're going to find someone who's got the ball in his hands and can help this team be a bucket getter, someone who can orchestrate the offense and take a little bit of the pressure off of Boozer, because it's very rare you have someone as gifted as Cooper Flagg is as a passer. And even then, you still had Tyrese Proctor and you had Sion James, who both had experience playing the point guard, even though they were supplementing Cooper Flagg as the true distributor. So that's just my 2 cents, and maybe that guy emerges as the second leading scorer.
Yeah, I'm curious to see who it would be. Duke is one of the finalists for Cedric Coward, along with Alabama, the Washington State guy who only played 6 games this past year. They've been in Stojakovic conversations. Dame Sarr is a recent name that's been brought up in some Duke circles. Who knows exactly what the rest of the roster looks like? But what we do know is that we're super excited that Isaiah Evans is coming back for another year. That means a couple of other guys have made NBA draft decisions for the Duke basketball team. We'll talk about that after we take this break here on today's episode. All right, Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I was able to make some surprising insights, including realizing just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I'm able to budget smarter and save a whole lot more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for half off your first year. Monarch Money is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep this thing rolling. I've got Leif Thulin here from Locked On NBA Big Board. He's been on the program multiple times in the past, and excited to continue talking about the Duke basketball team and what's to come. We've got a couple of draft decisions that have happened, and then the big one still looming, big in the literal sense. Khaman Maluach, at the time we're talking, here 3 or 4 days away from that entrant deadline for guys to put their name into the draft, has not yet declared. But Leif, I think everybody in the world, everybody amongst Duke basketball fans does expect Maluach to go ahead and take that next step and join the NBA.
Yeah, I'd be stunned if he doesn't. I have him as a top 10 pick on my board, someone that can be a center. I won't say a franchise star necessarily, but he does have immense potential. But think of Mark Williams, and maybe even more naturally talented than Mark Williams, who took a little longer to develop and has so far been injury prone. But if you have that trajectory, it's very unlikely you return to school, even though many will say, well, he was poor against Houston. He didn't have the impact. Like, what you're doing is you're projecting him for the future.
Yeah.
And many scouts will drool over the natural ability to protect the rim out of drop coverage, to slide his feet and recover when beaten out of switches, and then the natural ability to knock down free throws and jump shots, as well as have soft enough hands to finish. Now, is there a ton of refinement that will have to happen? Absolutely. But he's a very wet ball of clay that you can mold, and he's got more to mold than the vast majority of players in this draft. So still a top 10 pick in my eyes.
Yeah, for Duke to go from Mark Williams to Derek Lively to Khaman Maluach, I mean, I want this big. I mean, that's a lot of wingspan and length and height and dunking ability and everything. I hope the next great comes down the line for the Duke basketball team. So we do expect him to make that decision and set himself up for a top 10 status there at the next level. Cooper Flagg waited a little bit longer than I think everybody was hopeful for, and started to build up hope amongst the obnoxious Duke fans that maybe he would come back for a second season. That's not going to be the case. When you see Cooper Flagg and you think about what he was able to do as a freshman in college basketball, can you put words to it?
Yeah, actually, I have a good answer for you on this. And I said this in about November and December, that I thought he was the best prospect, not counting Victor Wembanyama, that I've evaluated since Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I think Cooper Flagg better than Anthony Davis and better than Zion Williamson. And my rationale for why he was better than Zion, because this is near and dear to your guys' hearts, Zion was great at scoring, and when he wanted to, could be an all-world defender in the collegiate game. But I didn't feel like he helped his team as much as Cooper Flagg did. Like, Zion was going to get his, and he was going to make others better because of sheer athleticism. Cooper Flagg could dominate in so many different ways, didn't have to have the ball in his hands, and he'd still be the best player on the court. So what Duke is missing is probably one of the best players in the past 10 years of college basketball, and a guy that I think compares nicely to Jayson Tatum in the NBA. So I'm a diehard Jazz fan. I've been praying that Cooper Flagg ends up with my Utah Jazz. I also think that I said this comparison about 2 months ago. A lot of people said Kawhi Leonard, and as the season progressed, and I didn't dislike it. I just didn't think it was spot on in terms of play style, and I don't think Tatum's spot on. But one thing you can say is he's a better college player than Jayson Tatum. He scored just as much as Jayson Tatum on a better basketball team at Duke, and his knock was he's not a good scorer. Like, Cooper Flagg's knock was he's an inefficient shooter, he's got janky form, and he's not a natural scorer. So therefore, Ace Bailey, if he reaches his highest potential, could be better than Cooper Flagg because he's a better scorer. Well, Cooper Flagg scored more, shot more efficiently than both Ace Bailey and Jayson Tatum. He shot 80% and 38% from three. That 84% from the line, 38% from three, and those were his deficiencies. Now let's get to the strengths. He's a better passer than any of these type of prospects in a long, long time.
Right.
Someone who can be the best defender on an NBA team already, and his deficiency scoring, he scored basically 20 a game, and when the competition was better, he scored 24 a game. Like, the dude's unbelievable. He's the real deal. My comparison to Tatum is essentially Jayson Tatum scores the basketball, and he's a mismatch creator on offense, basically the initiator, even though you'd say Drew Holiday and Derek White are the point guards. He's essentially the true playmaker. And then defensively, he starts on fives, finishes possession on ones, and is able to bring the ball up the court and score 25 a game consistently for a team that's built to win a championship and just did. So I think Cooper Flagg is a guy that by the end of his rookie contract, hopefully with my Utah Jazz, is a perennial all-star. Like, that's already what he'll have established himself as. So putting into words what Cooper Flagg was for Duke, that's the best college basketball player that's played in the last 15 years. in terms of a holistic impact. And you could argue maybe Zion, you could argue Anthony Davis, you could argue maybe Frank Kaminsky, guys like that. But that's the conversation, the upper echelon that he is in. And Duke, though they have a guy who's excellent and Boozer coming in, I think they'll be hard-pressed to have someone like Flagg.
Yeah, from the opening night game where Duke's playing Maine, his home state school, to then the early contest against Kansas and Kentucky when you see him battling with some cramps late in the game and the turnovers, to still go through all of that, to have the dunk that he had against Pittsburgh and then a 42-point scoring effort, the ACC freshman scoring mark against Notre Dame. Unbelievable what he was able to do, and certainly a guy that we're going to hold near and dear to our hearts for quite some time. All right, the other most recent decision that's taken place in terms of going to the next level and playing at the NBA is Tyrese Proctor, Leif. And this is someone who reclassed a year early to come to college and play for Duke. He just finished up his third season playing for John Shire, and now he's making the jump to the league. There was chatter that maybe, just maybe, he'd run it back for a senior season, but ultimately he's off to the NBA.
Yeah, and I think it's time. Like, he demonstrated he can shoot the ball significantly better than he had in his prior 2 seasons. He played off the ball, but still has tape of being an effective point guard. And the biggest thing for Tyrese Proctor is showing that he can defensively be an impactful player, because I think he was one of the best defenders in the ACC and all of college basketball on the perimeter. And then he shot excellently when he wasn't tasked with being the distributor. My knock on him after his freshman and sophomore year is he couldn't put pressure on the rim as a pick and roll guy. He made some good passes, but he couldn't put pressure on the rim, and he shot inefficiently. Shot great off the ball, and defensively still very good, contributed very highly on a winning team. Scouts saw plenty of him watching the likes of Cooper, Khan, and Khaman, and I think this is as good a time to enter the draft as there was for Tyrese Proctor, not to mention it opens up pathways for younger players that want that experience. And that's what I don't want to use the word promise. Like, I doubt John Shire said, I promise you this playing time if Proctor came back, but it is the expectation that those guys would play early in their career. So Caden Boozer, someone like that. Caleb Foster, like I mentioned, I'm not particularly high on Caleb Foster. I haven't been any of the years he's been at Duke. But that said, it's an expectation that he'll take leaps forward, and the timing for both Duke's satisfaction. Obviously, he'd love Tyrese Proctor back, but he's done his thing. And as Duke fans, you probably should be happy for Tyrese Proctor choosing to leave after this amazing season, because I think he's got a chance to be the tail end of the first round, likely early second. But I think there's a world in which he finds himself with a team that says, you know what, we want someone who can play defense and knock down open shots on our bench. I think there's a world. Productivity is becoming prioritized more so than potential towards the end of first round, because you want to have players on rookie deals that can contribute for those winning teams. And if you're at the end of the first round, barring a few teams that have traded, you're usually joining a contributor, joining to be a contributor on a contender.
Yeah, and for Proctor to be able to say, I've played in these big games for Duke, this is what I was able to do. I mean, you're able to set yourself up. Duke lists him at 6'6", 185. We'll see kind of what those measurables come in to actually be for Tyrese Proctor when he heads off to the combine. But I thought he fought his tail off on the defensive end of the floor for Duke as well, and had that big assignment. Not sure how much of that is going to translate to being kind of his go-to at the next level, but does have a nice frame that he's working with too, Leif.
Yeah, he's got good length, and I think he can guard a couple positions. Obviously, he's a slender build, but he's got tremendous footwork, and he's been a hound on the ball, much like Trey Jones was for Duke.
Yep.
Like, those best defensive teams that Duke has had a player who really pressures the ball at the top, and players on the backside who can clean up when the player feels pressure. They drive to the paint, enter Cooper, Flagg, Khaman, Maluach to clean up. Those previous teams with Trey Jones had.
I miss Trey Jones, man.
And Zion was the best free safety in basketball. Yeah. And I understand that it's not an actual position, but the point is he cleaned up, and all those mistakes that Trey Jones made the other team do, Zion Williamson was there to intercept it.
Yep. I love it. All right, we're going to take one more time out here on the program today, and then when we come back, we'll have a couple of final thoughts from Leif. We're talking all things Duke basketball at the next level here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. Tomorrow's the big day. It's the NFL Draft. So right now, for your second listen and second watch today, make sure that you check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players. Get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Let's continue here on the show. We've got Leif Thulin here with us talking about the Duke basketball squad getting set for this upcoming season. I mentioned we're still expecting Maluach to declare for the draft. Duke is in the running for Cedric Coward. There have been a couple of other names linked to this Duke basketball team for this upcoming season. You mentioned guard help for the Blue Devils. I also think a little bit of depth in the front court, considering some of the injuries that Gongba and Malik Brown had to go through at different portions of the season this year. When you put together kind of this Duke team, how are they standing in your eyes right now? And maybe what are those one or two missing pieces?
I mean, Duke's always going to have a structure that is 95th or above percentile. Like that's the baseline, because you're going to have 5-star recruits. And though freshmen have rarely won in college basketball, that's sort of a myth, because Duke and Kentucky under Calipari often made deep runs, didn't win the championship in those. And they had good regular seasons. So the reason I start there is Duke's level of talent will always be there. And here's a frustrating part of not rooting for Duke and watching what happens is Duke will have a 95th percentile roster already, if not higher, and then doesn't have to pay the same surplus of money to get guys as some other teams, because they have the track record of saying, you know, we'll send you the NBA draft. So, for instance, Sion James could have gone far more to a far higher bidder, and he came in and was a starter on what was a historically dominant team. I know they didn't win the championship, but that was a historically dominant team. There's tons of examples of this. Mason Gillis played 30 minutes in a national championship game the year before and became the 8th man on Duke's team. So
the sales pitch is easy.
The sales pitch is easy, and you don't need to sell with as much cash. Yeah. And so Duke is going to be able to get guys with their cachet as opposed to cash. And, oh, yeah, they have their cash still. So Duke's going to be able to supplement the roster and round the edges. Like I said, I'm not a believer in Caleb Foster being a very good college point guard. I think he's a fine college player, but Duke can't just say, you know what, like, you're adequate, that's fine. No, like, because of those aspirations to win a national championship, because you have a All-American talent at power forward who can do a ton with the basketball, because you've got other guys, then you need to have someone that plays the most important position in basketball that has the chops to be all conference. He doesn't have to be an All-American, but it has to be all conference ability. Now, if you were to get Sarr or Coward, I think some of that necessity is alleviated. You don't need it as badly, but I still think you're likely to find a guard in the portal. Now, if you get Stojakovic, I'll be very curious to see what happens with Khaman as well as Evans. Like, what's the deal there? But I think Duke's got another move coming. They got someone up their sleeve. A point guard is coming. That's what my gut tells me. But even if no changes happen and Duke is set, I think it's a top 10 roster. I don't think that's a national championship roster, though. I think there are some pieces that are missing. You expect a humongous gap from what Pat Nongba was year 1 to year 2, and that's probably going to happen. But you still have to take a big leap of faith for him to even reach what Khaman Maluach was. Yeah. And Maluach grew throughout the season. Then you need a humongous leap of faith for Isaiah Evans to be what Con Knipple was. And that doesn't even touch on, I just mentioned Cooper Flagg was one of the best players in the last 15 years. Yeah. So how good can Boozer be? And I think Boozer's a top 3 pick the next year. I think he's almost flying under the radar, how good he is. And it's rare because his father is an NBA player. Like, that never happens. But it's somehow he's underrated because Darren Peterson and AJ DiManza are so well regarded and so highly coveted. But I just don't think the team's quite championship good yet. And if Duke's roster doesn't appear championship good to someone like me who studies college basketball, that means something else is coming, because John Shire will say, you know what, we can be better. And last year's team was absolutely loaded, and almost too much so, because you saw players not get enough time, and they found a way to prioritize the top 8 guys in a rotation. But this team, how many of those guys would actually play on last year's team? Not many.
Right. No, and I think that's going to be the big thing that's answered over these next few weeks. We've obviously got, we mentioned Sion James didn't commit to Duke until mid-May, so it could be some time before we see those final pieces put together for this Duke basketball team. But in John Shire, we trust. It's done us well so far. All right, before we get out of here, a lot of people in the Duke world have obviously, now that the college season is over, are following in your footsteps. Duke loves having the blueprint and footprint that they have on the NBA, so we're dialed in to the NBA playoffs. When we look at the two biggest brands, Leif, when you look at Jayson Tatum with the Boston Celtics, or when you take JJ Redick coaching the LA Lakers, those big two teams, who's got the better odds of getting the job done? How do you see those two kind of storylines playing out here through the playoffs?
Well, I think the Celtics
we got to
are
look
still
at
the
this
team.
through the Duke lens, you know?
I mean, the Celtics are still the team to beat. So Tatum's got a better chance to hoist the trophy than JJ Redick does. I think JJ Redick's done a tremendous job. I was wondering where you're going with the second player. I was trying to rack my brain and say who's the Duke guy, because Kyrie's out, Zion's out, like all these guys. I mean, I think Tatum's got a really good chance to assert himself as one of the better winners. I don't think it's necessarily all him, and that's almost hurt his perception. But the reality is, and this is part of my pitch for why Cooper Flagg's so great and why I think he's like Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum's consistently been one of the top 5-6 players in the NBA because of his availability and his consistency of, I'm going to score 27 points, play good defense, and initiate offense. I don't think Jayson Tatum's ever going to be the best player in the world, but he's always going to be in the conversation for all NBA first team because his team's very good and he's the best player on it. So he's got a really good chance to establish that brand. And the thing he's lacking from a personal standpoint is the finals MVP. And I think it's very possible he gets it. I think it's going to be the Celtics and the Thunder. I've thought this all year. I actually think the Thunder's got a better chance than I previously did, but I think experience is a really big deal, and Jayson Tatum's got a claim to show how good he is to the world. That said, Jayson Tatum's never been my favorite guy, but if the Jazz get Cooper Flagg, I'll like Jayson Tatum because it's a bit of the pathway, the career arc. It could be similar.
Yeah, the similarities there between the two players would certainly add up for you to do that. You know,
I'm a Grant Hill guy. I'm a Grant Hill guy for Duke, though. That's the real OG Duke best player in my opinion.
No kidding. And I mean, we do. So I set you up there because I was going for the big brands here. I was going for Lakers and Celtics, big conversation pieces for everybody, and trying to find the NBA playoff angle here. I could have thrown something like Paolo Banchero and the Magic, but this is us assuming Boston's going to be able to go by. There were other guys out there we could have made, but just thought we would stick it there. So we'll see. We enjoyed Kyle Filipowski's rookie year there in Utah with you guys in the Jazz, and you and I have to talk about that sometime soon coming up here again on the pod. Leif, tell us about your work, where people can follow you, and how they can support what you do.
Yeah, my Twitter handle, if you're watching on YouTube, is right there in the middle and the bottom of the screen. And if you're not, it's just my name, LeifThulin. Both the first letters of first and last name are capitalized. And I'll be posting more and more draft content. So you'll see 3 Duke Blue Devils in my top 10. Obviously, Cooper Flagg at 1, Khan and Khaman Maluach are at 8 and 9 right now, respectively. And I actually have Tyrese Proctor at 28 right now on my board. So 4 Duke Blue Devils in the first round. I'll be posting that stuff, and I'm on Locked on College Basketball Weekly. I host Locked on College Basketball Game Night throughout the season on Saturday nights. So a lot of college basketball content, and I'm also a host on Locked on Jazz for David Locke when he's out of town. So the month of June, hopefully when the Jazz find their way to selecting Cooper Flagg, I'll be talking a lot about your Duke Blue Devils all throughout June when I'm hosting Locked on Jazz.
Yeah, you're capturing the flag. That's for sure. We love that.
I sure hope so.
Good to see you, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Leif Thulin joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always appreciate his thoughts and insight. That dude just knows ball, and I feel smarter after listening to him, and I think you do as well. Follow us wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. Share it with your friends. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you, and good day.